Okay, now we're going to start talking about how to convert percents to decimals and decimals to percents. We just talked about that with fractions. Now we're going to move on to decimals, and I'm going to use the same sheet. So let's jump right into, let's say, 25%. How can I convert 25% into a decimal? To help us answer this question, we're going to think back to how we converted this into fractions. 25% is the same thing as saying 25 over 100. But we don't want a fraction. We want a decimal. But what does this problem represent? It is a fraction, but it's also a division problem. So I need to divide 100 by 25, or vice versa actually, 25 by 100. And when we were talking about metric conversions, this is familiar to metric conversions, is when we are dividing by a number that ends in 0, 10, 100, 1,000, all we need to do, a trick that we have, is we're just going to move the decimal place over to the left to make our number smaller. So that's all I'm going to do with 25. Here's where my decimal is normally in 25, and I need to move it over to the left 1 time, 2 times based on the number of zeros. So 1 time, 2 times. There is my converted percentage. 25% equals, and I'm going to put a 0 in there, 0.25 or 25 hundredths. So that is converting a percent to a decimal. You just move the decimal place over to the left 2 times to make our number smaller. What if I have a decimal, 0.35, 35 hundredths? How could I take that decimal and turn it into a percentage? Well, I'm just going to do the opposite of what I did over here. I moved the decimal to the left twice that way, but now I've got a decimal and I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to move it to the right 2 times. 1 time, 2 times. And the reason I'm doing it 2 times is because we're still dealing with this 100%. And that's what's going to give us the number of times we move it over. So 0.35 or 35 hundredths is equal to 35%. Because I moved it once, twice. There's my new decimal place cleaned up. It looks like it down there. So decimal, I think, is a little more easier because all we're doing is moving the decimal to the left or the right, depending on what the situation is. If I have my percent, I'm moving the decimal place to the left to make my number smaller. If I have my decimal, I'm moving it to the right to make my number bigger. And that is percent conversion. We went back and forth between fractions and percentages, and we went back and forth between decimals and percentages. And that's what today's worksheet is going to be all about.